evening and welcome to the WDSU News Hot Seat. I'm Travers Mackle. Tonight, once again, we are talking politics as the mayor's race is quickly approaching. It is next Saturday. LaToya Cantrell versus Desiree Charbonnet. Joining us tonight, a very familiar face, UNO political professor, Dr. Ed Charbonnet from the University of New Orleans. Thanks for joining us. You were here for the primary. Let me rephrase. You were here for qualifying the primary, and you'll be here election night. There's been a lot going on since the primary election, especially with LaToya Cantrell and the credit card controversy surrounding council members, especially her with the spending. But a lot of poll numbers show it really hasn't affected her whatsoever.
Yeah, it is surprising that she has received a lot of negative media coverage, and it really hasn't hurt her numbers. It hasn't dampened her supporters' enthusiasm. The two polls that I've seen show her up significantly by double digits. And I think one of the things that's probably helped her is the endorsement by Michael Bagnaris. He's been cutting ads, doing a full-throated endorsement for her. So I think that's helped, and also Troy Henry has endorsed her as well. And the other thing I think that might be going on is that people just aren't paying attention, as much attention as we would probably like to the campaign, that the information's out there, but people aren't necessarily processing that information. They've already made up their mind on who they're going to support, and regardless of what news is out there, they're sticking with that support.
So just to give you credit, back when we were here, you see both female candidates up there. New Orleans will elect its first female mayor in the history of the city. You said this back in qualifying in July. You thought the city would elect the first female mayor. We're obviously on a path to that, but why don't people seem to care? Why are people not engaged? Voter turnout was very low for the primary. It's expected to be low for the runoff on Saturday. Why are people not engaged in this race?
Well, I think there's several reasons. There's certainly the concern about apathy, that people feel that their vote doesn't really matter, that regardless who they choose to, into this office, that things aren't really going to change. And I think people are frustrated by politics today. They see what's going on the national scene, and they don't like what they see, and they're turned off that way. And I think a lot of it is just kind of overkill. People are just being bombarded with information, and that they're just putting it to the side, and that it's just that they don't feel connected anymore. I think a lot of people just don't feel connected to the system. They don't feel their vote counts. They're not really concerned about the big picture, and so that's what I think is really lacking.
Is that why this credit card controversy, which was a huge news story for really about the last 2 weeks, not just with LaToya Cantrell, but now it's spread really throughout the entire council? Do you think that's one of the reasons why people just seem to go, not really interested? Because there have been situations that are, a lot of people would make the argument that aren't this serious, that have wounded candidates, but like we said, LaToya Cantrell seems to be up in the polls despite what's going on.
Yeah, it's we tend to think that people are just merely receivers of information, but people are processors of information, and that we have a wonderful capacity to ignore information that doesn't agree with our existing predispositions. And I think if people have already made up their mind that they're going to support LaToya Cantrell or Desiree Charbonnet, negative information is just going to be cast to the side. I mean, we see this with someone like Donald Trump, right? Here's someone who receives tons of negative coverage in the media, but his supporters just ignore all that, and they're going to continue to back him.
Is there one group that could swing this election? The reason why I ask that is because recently, it's my understanding, Friday, Saturday, really over the weekend, Congressman Steve Scalise was doing robocalls. He's endorsing Desiree Charbonnet. Is that something that could swing this, or does it get back to your point of people's minds seem to be made up right now?
I think they probably were robocalling for early voting, and early voting was up just slightly. I think it was up to about 6.9%, which was better than for the primary. That's the thing that the Charbonnet campaign needs to do. They need to have a much better ground game. I think they were completely outclassed by the Cantrell campaign last time in terms of the ground game, robocalling people, making sure you got your supporters to the polls. In terms of any kind of group that can make or break a difference, the majority of voters in the city are female, and so that's the vote you have to go after.
But we have two female candidates, so
yes.
Is it a wash in this race? There's not Michael Bagnaris and Troy Henry in the runoff. It's LaToya Cantrell versus Desiree Charbonnet.
That's true, but women aren't going to vote for a woman just because she's a woman. They're going to vote for the person they think can best do the job. And so at this point, it appears that LaToya Cantrell is better able to make that argument.
What do you see happening as we head into the final few days here? Most people don't expect anything to change. When I say that, no one expects anything atomic, any major announcements, any more attack ads. Attack ads have been flying. We've seen them all out there right now. Do you expect anything to happen as we head really into the 11th hour here?
Well, you never know what can happen. I don't like to predict the future because whatever I predict, then something will happen.
A week could feel like a month at this point.
But in terms of, I think people's preferences are pretty much baked in right now, and that I think that it would probably take like an atomic bomb type of scenario where that would basically shake people off who they want to vote. And so it's really hard to say that there would be this huge significant shift in support from one candidate to another over the last week.
The interesting thing about this, if you follow what's going on with these candidates, the issues are crime, sewage and water board, jobs, infrastructure. Their platforms are very similar. I mean, do they have some differences? Sure, but the number one thing with crime is hire more police officers, better response times. Do they have very similar platforms and people are just voting because of the personalities here?
Well, they do have similar platforms, and I think what gives Cantrell the edge is that she's actually in city government right now, that she's got that experience of legislating and handling budgets and dealing with the police. And so I think she's just has a much closer connection to what's going on, and that's, I think, is what's giving her the advantage over Charbonnet.
How much do people pay attention to what's going on with the Sewage and Water Board? Obviously, there was a big council hearing last week. A lot of people showed up, a lot of yelling and screaming. It seems like that is an agency that whoever wins this race will have to address, obviously hire a new superintendent as Cedric Grant is no longer there. So how much will that weigh on this race? Do voters go into the booth and say, you know what, I need somebody who can handle Sewage and Water Board here?
That's a major issue as well as crime, but I think it's the crime issue that dominates everything else. I don't think anyone's really kind of considering the Sewage and Water Board or infrastructure. I think what most people have on their mind is the crime issue, and they want to see which candidate, or they want to vote for the candidate they think can best address that issue. That's the one issue that just completely dominates and outshines all the other issues.
Is this an interesting election? Because Desiree Charbonnet is backed not only by Cedric Richmond, but also Steve Scalise, the two congressmen who make up and represent New Orleans. What does it say for them in the future if their candidate does not win? We don't know what's going to happen, obviously, but if their candidate doesn't win, they have to work with the mayor, LaToya Cantrell, if she would win. How does that work, and what does it say for them and their political backing of candidates?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, they really did back her, and they provided her with significant resources, right. $1.8 million, which I understand is now gone. So what does that say in terms of her campaign, that all this money was spent and they came up 9 points behind Cantrell in the primary? There will be other elections and other races for congressmen. So, they tend to, look past it. They have the election and then, okay, they're everyone's buddy-buddy. We'll be able to work together. And then for the next election, then we'll pick sides again.
Do you expect any more endorsements to come out from the council, from anybody significant in the home stretch?
The only endorsement I haven't really heard about is from the mayor, and
right.
It'd be interesting to see who the mayor endorses, if he is going to endorse anyone. And it'll be interesting to see, how people who evaluate Landrieu, which candidate that they would support. But so he can certainly have an indirect effect on the election, because there may be those people who, like Landrieu, support one of the two candidates.
How big of a job does the next mayor have? Whoever is elected on Saturday, LaToya Cantrell or Desiree Charbonnet, how big is the job on a scale of 1 to 10 that they have to tackle when they get to City Hall?
It's an 11 because it's a big job. It's a full-time job. I mean, you're probably working 12 to 16 hours a day. You've got to make the big decisions that affect all of our lives. You've got to, understand budgeting. You've got to understand the bureaucracy. You've got to understand civil engineering. You've got to understand crime prevention. And so you need to wear a lot of hats if you're going to be mayor. So whoever gets this job, they're going to be very busy. It'll be full time. Has
it become thankless? I talked to a candidate for elected office, and they told me they can't even go to a restaurant anymore without somebody tapping them on the shoulder saying, there's a pothole on my street, or there's this problem. I mean, has this become to the point where it's a prominent position? You're leading the city of New Orleans, the state's flagship city, but Is it thankless to some extent, especially when you start building up years and years in office?
I don't know if it's thankless or not. I'm sure that, you know, I've attended a number of events with the council members and the mayor, and there's always someone coming up to them and complaining about something. And so for me, I would say I could never have that job because I just couldn't listen to all these people complain. But these people feel that they have the necessary skills to do the job and to meet people's needs. And so you're right, there's you know, it's about prestige, it's about power, it's about policy, and, you know, people have this ambition and feel that they can make a difference, and so they're willing to listen to these people's complaints. It just comes with the job. I mean, if you want this job, just be willing to, you know, understand that you're going to own every pothole in the city.
We will see that when we elect the first mayor in the city of New Orleans. Really quickly, before we let you go, 2 district council races coming up. District E in New Orleans East, District B, which is a big district, downtown, uptown, Broadmoor, Central City. Let's go with District B alphabetically here. Seth Bloom versus Jay Banks. They haven't really advertised on TV. A lot of billboards, a lot of mailers. How is that race shaking out right now?
That's a race that what we're finding is a district there that's evenly divided. 46% white, 46% African American, 8% other. And so it's going to come down to the candidate who can best produce crossover vote. And as we saw in the primary, Jay Banks was better able to do that than Seth Bloom. And so what we're looking at in District B is organization versus money. Jay Banks, being King of Zulu, being part of BOLD, the YMCA there, should be able to have that organization and mobilize people, where Seth Bloom has the money in terms of the flyers and the advertising. And so, you know, will the air war defeat the ground war or vice versa? Really
quickly with District E, Cindy Wynn, who's run for elected office before, versus the incumbent James Gray. You don't really hear much about this race that's going on in New Orleans East, but a very important part of the city.
Yes, absolutely. If I'm James Gray, I'd be concerned because in the primary, 62% of voters voted against you. And as an incumbent, that's not a good sign. And so, you know, do voters in District E really want change? And if they do, that gives Cindy Wynn the advantage.
Do you expect those 2 races to be close on election night?
I do. I expect, especially in District B, I think it's going to be very close. District E, turnout tends to be lower, so the candidate who's able to get their people to the polls will have the advantage.
All right. He's Dr. Ed Chervenak, University of New Orleans. I'm Travers Mackel. Election Day is Saturday. We will have complete coverage all day and then all Saturday night. For now, let's send it back to you. This is The Hot Seat. I'm Travers Mackel.